The first thing she noticed was the weight. It pressed against her shoulders, her chest, her bones, like an invisible ocean trying to pull her down. Back home, gravity was gentle, almost like a suggestion. Here on Earth it was a command. She tightened her grip on the seat. The aircraft hummed around her. Metal walls, narrow windows, unfamiliar lights blinking in patterns she didn't yet understand. Everything felt dense. Even the air. Her name was Lyra. And this was her first time leaving her world. She had studied Earth for years. Human behavior, language, emotions, all carefully observed from a distance. She knew their words. She knew their customs. But knowing was not the same as feeling. And right now she was feeling too much. The plane suddenly shook. A violent jolt ran through the cabin. Lyra's breath caught. Another tremor followed, stronger this time. The overhead compartments rattled. A few passengers gasped. Someone laughed nervously. Lyra didn't understand laughter in moments like this. Her fingers dug into the armrest. "What is happening?" she whispered, her voice barely steady. The man sitting beside her turned his head. He looked ordinary. Dark hair, calm eyes, maybe in his early 30s. There was nothing extraordinary about him, nothing that would stand out in a crowd. But right now he was the only stable thing in her world. "It's just turbulence," he said gently. She blinked. "Turbulence?" "Yeah," he nodded. "Air currents. The plane's just passing through rough air. It's normal." Normal. The word didn't help. The plane dropped suddenly just for a second, but it was enough. Lyra's entire body tensed. Her instincts screamed danger. On her world, sudden shifts like this meant disaster. Storms that could tear cities apart, gravitational anomalies that could collapse structures instantly. Her breathing quickened. "This is not safe," she said, her voice trembling now. "We are falling." "We're not falling," the man replied, still calm. "It just feels like that. Feels like that." Humans used feelings in such strange ways. Another jolt. This time Lyra flinched visibly. Her hand slipped from the armrest, and without thinking she reached out. She grabbed his hand. For a moment both of them froze. The contact was unexpected. Warm. Solid. Real. Lyra's eyes widened slightly. This was her first direct physical contact with a human. She had studied touch in theory, its role in emotional bonding, reassurance, connection. But theory had never prepared her for this. There was something different about it. Her species communicated mostly through light signals and subtle energy shifts. Physical touch was rare, almost ceremonial. But this was simple. Instinctive. Human. The man looked at their hands, then back at her. He didn't pull away. "It's okay," he said softly. "You're safe." Safe. The word carried weight. Lyra studied his face. His heartbeat, she could feel it faintly through his hand, was steady. Not rushed, not panicked. He wasn't afraid. And somehow, that mattered. The plane shook again, but this time, something had changed. The fear didn't spike the same way. It was still there, but quieter. Like a storm heard from a distance instead of being inside it. Her grip tightened slightly. "On my world," she said slowly, choosing her words carefully, "this kind of movement would mean collapse. Structural failure. High probability of death." The man raised an eyebrow, a faint smile forming. "Well," he said, "good thing you're not on your world." She stared at him. Such a simple statement. And yet, it shifted something inside her. Not on her world. She looked around the cabin again. Humans sitting calmly. Some watching movies. Some sleeping. A child laughing 2 rows ahead. No panic. No fear. Just trust. "How do you remain calm?" she asked. He shrugged slightly. "Experience, I guess. And trust in the system." System? The plane, the pilots, the engineering. It's built to handle this. Built to handle this. Lyra processed the idea. On her world, survival meant constant adaptation. Nothing was ever fully predictable. But here, humans built things that could withstand chaos. It was impressive. Another smaller tremor passed. She didn't flinch this time. Her focus remained on the warmth of his hand. It grounded her. Not just physically but emotionally. "What is your name?" she asked. "Armin," he replied. "Armin," she repeated, testing the sound. "And you?" She hesitated. There were protocols. Rules about identity disclosure. But something about this moment felt beyond protocol. "Lyra." "Lyra," he said, nodding. "Nice to meet you." "Nice to meet you." Another human phrase she had studied. But hearing it felt different. The plane steadied slightly. The worst of the turbulence seemed to be passing. Lyra slowly became aware that she was still holding his hand. She looked down. Their fingers were intertwined now. She hadn't even noticed when that happened. A strange sensation moved through her chest. Not fear. Not exactly. Something softer. She loosened her grip slightly. "I apologize," she said. "This was involuntary." Armin shook his head. "No need to apologize." He didn't move his hand away. And neither did she. Silence settled between them, but it wasn't uncomfortable. It was calm. For the first time since boarding the aircraft, Lyra felt stable. Not because the turbulence had completely stopped, but because something inside her had. She turned her head toward the window. Clouds stretched endlessly beneath them, soft, white, almost unreal. "This planet," she murmured, "it is intense." Armin chuckled lightly. "Yeah," he said. "That's one way to describe it." She looked back at him. "Is it always like this?" she asked. "Unpredictable, yet controlled?" He thought for a moment. "Pretty much," he said. "That's kind of how life works here. Unpredictable, yet controlled." Lyra let the idea settle in her mind. Maybe that was the difference. Her world sought perfection, balance, precision, stability. Earth embraced imperfection. And somehow, made it work. Another small vibration passed through the plane. This time she didn't react at all. Instead, her attention stayed on the connection she was still holding. That one simple touch. It had changed everything. Her fear. Her perception. Her understanding of humans. All shifted, in a moment. She didn't fully understand why. But she knew this. This was important. Very important. The plane began its gradual descent. A soft announcement echoed through the cabin. They were approaching Earth. Lyra's first arrival. Her mission. Her purpose. All waiting below. But for now, she wasn't thinking about any of that. She was thinking about the warmth in her hand. And how, in a moment of fear, a human had reached back. The wheels touched the ground harder than Lyra expected. A sharp jolt ran through the aircraft, followed by a long rushing sound as the engines reversed. The entire plane trembled, but this time Lyra did not panic. Her fingers were still wrapped around Armin's hand. And somehow that made all the difference. She felt the impact, yes. The vibration, the pressure, the heavy pull of Earth's gravity pressing her into the seat, but it didn't overwhelm her the way the turbulence had. Because now she understood something she hadn't before. Stability wasn't always about the environment. Sometimes it came from connection. The plane slowed gradually, rolling across the runway until it finally came to a complete stop. A soft chime sounded. "Welcome," the overhead voice said, calm and practiced. Passengers began to move, unbuckling seatbelts, reaching for bags, stretching as if nothing extraordinary had happened. Lyra observed everything carefully. Humans returned to normal so quickly. Fear came, and then it left, as if it had never existed. Her species didn't work that way. Emotional states lingered. They echoed sometimes for days. But here, everything flowed. It unsettled her. And fascinated her. She slowly released Armin's hand. This time she noticed the absence immediately. The warmth was gone. A small, unfamiliar emptiness followed. "Thank you," she said quietly. Armin smiled, easy and natural. "No problem. First flight." She hesitated. There were many truths she could not reveal. "Yes," she said. "First experience like this." "Well," he said, standing up and reaching for his bag, "you handled it better than a lot of people." That wasn't true. But she didn't correct him. Instead, she watched him move, casual, confident, completely at ease in this environment. He belonged here. He did not. Not yet. The first step. When Lyra stepped off the plane, the weight of Earth hit her fully. It wasn't just physical anymore. It was everywhere. In the air. In the sounds. In the sheer density of life. The airport was overwhelming. Voices overlapped in dozens of tones. Footsteps echoed. Screens flashed information constantly. Announcements filled the space in rapid intervals. It was chaos. Organized chaos. Lyra moved carefully, her posture controlled, her movements slightly slower than those around her. She had practiced human walking patterns, but under Earth's gravity, every step required more effort. Her body was still adjusting. Her senses were still recalibrating. And her mind was trying to keep up. She glanced around. Families reunited. Friends laughing. Strangers passing without a second glance. So many connections. So many invisible threads between people. On her world, interactions were purposeful, limited, efficient. Here, they were constant. Messy. Alive. Lyra felt it all at once. And for a brief moment, she wished she still had that hand to hold. Separation. At the immigration checkpoint, the flow of people slowed. Lines formed. Barriers created order. Lyra stood still, waiting. Armin was just ahead of her. She watched him as he spoke to the officer, handed over documents, answered questions with ease. He moved through the system like he had done it 100 times. Because he probably had. Then it was her turn. The officer looked up. Purpose of visit? Lyra paused just for a fraction of a second. Research, she said. Not a lie. Just incomplete. How long will you stay? Undetermined. The officer frowned slightly. Lyra quickly corrected. Extended period. Academic observation. The officer studied her face. For a moment, Lyra felt something close to danger. Humans relied heavily on visual cues. Microexpressions. Behavioral patterns. She had trained for this. But training wasn't the same as reality. Finally, the officer stamped her passport. Welcome, he said. And just like that, she was on Earth. Officially. The distance begins. By the time Lyra exited the airport, Armin was gone. Disappeared into the flow of humanity. No trace. No connection. Just like that. She stood still for a moment. The absence felt stronger now. Stronger than it should. She had known him for less than a few hours. And yet, something had shifted. That one moment of touch. It lingered. Not just as memory, but as sensation. She could almost still feel it. Her fingers moved slightly as if expecting that warmth to return. It didn't. A strange thought formed in her mind. Humans do this all the time. They connect. They separate. They move on. How did they tolerate it? The mission versus the feeling. A vehicle arrived to pick her up. Black. Silent. Efficient. Her contact stepped out. A human. But not like the others. Controlled. Observant. Precise. Lyra, he said. You're late. There was turbulence, she replied. He didn't react. Unimportant, he said. We have work to begin immediately. Or, yes, her mission. Observation. Integration. Data collection. Understanding human emotional structures. She had prepared for this her entire life. And yet, her mind drifted. Back to the plane. Back to that moment. Back to that hand. Are you listening? The man asked. Yes, she said quickly. But she wasn't. Not fully. Something inside her had changed. And she didn't know how to measure it. The first night. The apartment was minimal. Clean. Functional. Designed for efficiency, not comfort. Lyra stood by the window looking out at the city. Lights everywhere. Movement everywhere. Life everywhere. Earth didn't sleep the way her world did. It pulsed. Continuously. She placed her hand against the glass. Cold. Unfeeling. Nothing like before. She closed her eyes. And for the first time since arriving, she focused inward. Analyzing. Comparing. Understanding. Her species categorized experiences clearly. Every reaction had a cause. Every sensation had a purpose. But this didn't fit. Why had that moment affected her so deeply? It was just physical contact. A basic human interaction. And yet, it had reduced fear. Stabilized her breathing. Altered her emotional state. It had grounded her. Her system didn't have a direct equivalent. Which meant, it was something uniquely human. Something powerful. Something dangerous? Or maybe, something essential. The realization. Lyra sat down slowly. Her body still adjusting to Earth's weight. Her mind still processing everything. And then, a thought came. Clear. Sure. Unavoidable. What if understanding humans requires feeling like them? Not observing. Not analyzing. But experiencing. Directly. Fully. Without distance. Her mission had always emphasized control. Detachment. Precision. But that moment on the plane had broken all of that. And instead of failure, it had created clarity. She understood fear differently now. Not as a concept, but as a sensation. And she understood comfort the same way. All because of one simple act. A hand, held in the middle of uncertainty. Something has changed. Lyra looked at her hand again. Slowly, thoughtfully. Then she whispered almost to herself. Armin. The name felt different now. Not just a sound. A memory. A connection. A point of reference. For the first time, Earth didn't feel completely alien. It felt reachable. Understandable. Maybe even meaningful. But there was a problem. A significant one. Because if one small human interaction could change her this much, What would happen next? Lyra did not expect to see him again. Statistically, it made no sense. Earth had billions of humans. Cities alone held millions. The chances of encountering the same individual twice, without coordination, were extremely low. That is what her training said. But her training had already begun to fail her. The attempt to be human. 3 days passed. 3 long, heavy, unfamiliar days. Lyra followed her mission instructions precisely. She observed human behavior in public spaces, cafes, streets, transit stations. She recorded speech patterns, emotional expressions, body language. She learned quickly. Too quickly, perhaps. Because imitation was easy. Understanding was not. She learned when to smile, when to nod, when to say, "I understand," even when she didn't. She learned how humans avoided eye contact with strangers, but also how they craved connection at the same time. Contradiction seemed normal here. But something kept interfering with her focus. A memory. Simple. Persistent. Unavoidable. A hand. Warm. Steady. Real. Lyra found herself watching people's hands more than their faces. How they moved. How they touched. How casually they connected, shaking hands, tapping shoulders, brushing past each other without hesitation. It was everywhere. And yet, that moment on the plane still felt different, more intense, more significant. She couldn't explain why. The instruction. On the 4th day, her handler gave her a new directive. "You need deeper integration," he said, standing near the window of the apartment. "Observation from a distance is insufficient." Lyra nodded. "I understand." "You will initiate direct interaction," he continued. "Build connections. Study emotional responses in real time." Connections. The word echoed. Her system registered it as a task. But something inside her responded differently. Almost instinctively. "Yes," she said. "Start simple," he added. "Casual conversation. Low-risk environments." Lyra processed the instruction. There was a nearby cafe she had observed multiple times. Humans gathered there. Spoke freely. Relaxed. It would be an ideal location. She prepared to leave. The cafe. The bell above the door chimed softly as she entered. The environment was warm. Not just in temperature. In feeling. Soft music played in the background. The scent of coffee filled the air. Conversations overlapped, but gently, not chaotically. It was comfortable. Lyra paused for a moment, absorbing it all. Then she moved forward. "Order?" the worker asked. Lyra hesitated briefly. "I will have what you recommend." The worker smiled. "First time here?" "Yes." "Then try a latte." Lyra nodded. "Latte." She watched carefully as the drink was prepared. The process fascinated her. The precision, the rhythm, the small details humans added even to simple tasks. She took the cup. Warm. Again that word. Warm. It seemed to follow her everywhere now. She turned. And froze. The improbable. He was there. Sitting by the window. Armin. For a moment, Lyra's entire system stalled. This was not expected. Not planned. Not logical. And yet, there he was. Alive. Real. Unchanged. Her grip tightened slightly on the cup. Her first instinct was to observe from a distance. To remain unseen. To analyze. But that wasn't her mission anymore. And more importantly, it wasn't what she wanted. She took a step forward. Then another. Her movements felt different now. Less calculated. More driven. "Armin." He looked up. Confusion flickered across his face for a fraction of a second. Then recognition. "Lyra?" he said, surprised. "Wait, from the flight?" "Yes." A small silence followed. But it wasn't empty. It was full. Of memory. Of shared experience. Of something unspoken. "Wow," he said, leaning back slightly. "What are the chances?" "Statistically low," Lyra replied. He laughed. She paused. That sound again. She was starting to understand it now. "It's good to see you," he said. The sentence was simple. But the effect. Immediate. Her internal state shifted slightly. Stabilized. Again. "May I sit?" she asked. "Yeah, of course." She sat across from him. Close enough to see the details she had missed before. The slight tiredness in his eyes. The relaxed way he held his posture. The subtle movements of his hands as he spoke. Human. Completely human. The conversation. "What brings you here?" he asked. "Observation," she replied. He raised an eyebrow. "Still sounds mysterious." She paused. Adjusted. "I am studying human behavior," she clarified. "That explains a lot," he said with a small smile. What does it explain? She asked. The way you talk. The way you look at things. It's like you're analyzing everything. She didn't deny it. Is that unusual? She asked. A little, he said. But not in a bad way. She processed that. Not bad. Acceptable. Interesting. She took a small sip of the latte. Warm. Again. Always warm. It is pleasant, she said. Yeah, he nodded. Coffee has that effect. She looked at him. No, she said quietly. Not just the coffee. He didn't respond immediately. Something in her tone had shifted. More honest. Less controlled. The pull. The conversation continued. Simple topics. Where he worked. What she was studying. Life in the city. But beneath the words, something else was happening. Lyra could feel it. A subtle pull. Not physical. Not visible. But real. She found herself focusing less on analysis. And more on experience. On how it felt to sit here. To talk. To exist in this moment. With him. This was new. Completely new. And slightly dangerous. Because it blurred the line between observer and participant. The moment. At one point, Armin reached for his cup. His hand moved across the table. And brushed against hers. Just slightly. Accidental. Brief. But enough. Lyra froze. The sensation returned instantly. Stronger this time. Familiar. But deeper. Her breath caught, not in fear but in recognition. Armin noticed. Sorry, he said quickly. Didn't mean to. It is fine, she said. But her voice was quieter now. More uncertain. She looked at her hand. Then at him. And for the first time, she didn't analyze the moment. She felt it. Fully. Without distance. Without control. And it changed everything. Again. The realization grows. After a while they stood to leave. Outside the city moved as always. Busy. Alive. Unpredictable. Do you come here often? Armin asked. Yes, she said. That wasn't entirely true. But it would be now. Then I guess I'll see you around, he said. See you around. Another human phrase. Open-ended. Uncertain. But hopeful. Lyra nodded. Yes. He turned to leave. And this time, she felt it clearly. The separation. The absence. Stronger than before. But also, different. Because now she knew it could be reversed. They could meet again. This wasn't a one-time event. This was something ongoing. Something growing. Something beyond the mission. That night, Lyra sat by the window again. The city lights reflected in her eyes. Her mind should have been organizing data. Recording observations. Reporting progress. But instead, it replayed moments. The cafe. The conversation. The touch. The feeling. And a new realization formed. Stronger than before. Clear. More undeniable. This is not just study. This is involvement. And involvement changes everything. She placed her hand over her other hand. As if recreating the sensation. It wasn't the same. But it reminded her. And that was enough. For now. Lyra stopped reporting everything. At first it was small. A delay here. A missing detail there. A conversation summarized instead of recorded in full. Nothing obvious. Nothing that would trigger suspicion. But it was enough. Enough to create space. Space between her mission and what she was becoming. The shift. A week passed. Then another. Lyra's routine changed. She still visited the same observation points, the streets, the transit stations, the crowded intersections, but one location became central. The cafe. Not because it was ideal for study, but because he was there. Not always, but often enough. And when he wasn't, she noticed. Too quickly. Too strongly. That absence again. It had become familiar now. Recognizable. Predictable. And strangely, personal. The pattern. Armin had a pattern. He arrived in the late afternoon. Ordered the same drink. Sat near the window. Sometimes worked on his laptop. Sometimes just watched the street. Lyra learned this without trying. Her system picked up repetition automatically. But this wasn't just data collection anymore. This was anticipation. She began timing her visits. Adjusting her schedule. Not because her handler told her to, but because she wanted to. That realization came slowly. And when it did, it stayed. Something feels wrong. One evening, as they sat across from each other, Armin leaned back slightly and studied her. Not casually. Carefully. You know, he said, you're different. Lyra looked at him. Different how? He hesitated. Hard to explain, he admitted. It's like You understand things but at the same time you don't. She stayed silent. That day on the plane, he continued, you were really scared. But now, it's like nothing affects you the same way. That is not accurate, Lyra said quietly. He tilted his head. No. She paused. There was a choice here. Truth or safety. It affects me, she said. More honestly than she expected. How? He asked. She searched for the right words. Human words. I am learning to process it differently. He watched her for a moment. Then nodded slowly. Yeah, he said. That makes sense. I think. But his eyes said something else. Curiosity. Suspicion. Interest. All mixed together. Lyra recognized it. And for the first time, she didn't try to avoid it. The first break. Later that night her handler called. You've reduced your reporting frequency, he said. His voice was calm. Too calm. I am optimizing data collection, Lyra replied. Explain. She hesitated. That hesitation was new. Direct interaction requires adaptive focus, she said. Your focus is drifting, he replied immediately. Lyra felt it. That pressure again. Not physical, but internal. Her mission pressing back. I am still gathering valuable information, she said. Silence. Then. Do not lose objectivity, he said. You are not here to become one of them. The words were clear. Sure. Final. But something inside her reacted. Strongly. More strongly than expected. I understand, she said. But for the first time, she wasn't sure that she did. The question she wasn't ready for. The next day Armin asked something simple. Too simple. Why did you grab my hand? Lyra froze. The memory came back instantly. The turbulence. The fear. The contact. Everything. It was instinct, she said. Instinct, he repeated. Yes. He leaned forward slightly. Most people don't grab strangers like that. She processed that. Then my response was abnormal. He smiled faintly. Maybe. But I didn't mind. That sentence, it did something. A small shift. A quiet warmth. Again. Always that warmth. Why didn't you pull away? She asked. Now it was his turn to pause. I don't know, he admitted. You looked like you needed it. Needed it. The word echoed. Lyra lowered her gaze slightly. She hadn't thought of it that way. Need implied something deeper than instinct. Something emotional. Was that what it was? The conflict. That night Lyra couldn't rest. Her mind ran through possibilities. Scenarios. Outcomes. Variables. Her training told her to step back. To re-establish distance. To maintain control. But her experience told her something else. That connection had value. Not just for study, but for understanding. And maybe, for something more. That thought was dangerous. Very dangerous. Because it had no place in her mission. The moment everything changes. It happened unexpectedly. Again. They were walking outside the cafe. The evening air was cooler. The city quieter than usual. For a moment neither of them spoke. Then, a loud sound echoed nearby. A car braking suddenly. A sharp, sudden noise. Lyra reacted instantly. Her body tensed. Her breathing shifted. Not fear, but alertness. Too fast. Too precise. Too controlled. Armin noticed. Hey, he said. Relax. It's just a car. She didn't respond immediately. Her system had already analyzed the sound. Distance. Speed. Risk level. Zero threat. But her reaction had already happened. She turned to him and saw it clearly. He had noticed. Really noticed. That wasn't normal, he said quietly. Lyra's silence confirmed it. You reacted before the sound even finished, he added. She searched for an explanation. A human explanation. I have strong reflexes, she said. He didn't look convinced. Yeah, he said slowly. I can see that. The space between them changed. Not dramatically, but enough. A small shift. A question forming. A line being crossed. Closer and further. They stood there for a moment. Neither moving. Neither speaking. Then Armin did something simple. He reached out and gently touched her wrist. Not grabbing. Not pulling. Just contact. Lyra felt it immediately. Stronger than before. Clear. More intense. Her system responded. But not with analysis. With feeling. Pure. Unfiltered. Hey, he said softly. You're okay. That sentence. Again. It stabilized her. Grounded her. But now it did something more. It connected her. Not just physically, but emotionally. And that was new. Completely new. The line is gone. When he let go, the absence felt sharper than ever. But this time, it didn't confuse her. It clarified something. She understood now. At least partially. This wasn't just curiosity. This wasn't just observation. This was connection. Real. Human. Unpredictable. And impossible to ignore. Her mission had a clear boundary. Do not become involved. But that boundary was already gone. The decision, unspoken. That night, Lyra didn't send her report. Not delayed. Not incomplete. Just absent. For the first time since arriving. She chose not to. She stood by the window again. Looking at the city. Feeling its weight. Its energy. Its unpredictability. And within all of that, she felt something else. Something steady. Something human. Something she hadn't come here expecting. She whispered quietly. Not as data. Not as analysis. But as truth. I want to understand this. And for the first time, that meant more than her mission. Lyra knew it was coming. Silence in her world was never ignored. Missed reports were not accidents. They were signals. And someone was already listening. The recall. The message arrived at exactly 2 o'clock. No sound. No visible alert. Just a subtle activation inside the device embedded beneath her wrist. Technology far beyond anything Earth could detect. A single line appeared in her mind. Report immediately. Priority, critical. Her body went still. For a moment, the room felt heavier than usual. Not just Earth's gravity, but something else. Pressure. Expectation. Control. She closed her eyes. And responded. The connection formed instantly. A familiar presence filled her awareness. Her handler. You have deviated, he said. No greeting. No delay. Just truth. Yes, Lyra replied. There was no point denying it. You have reduced communication, altered behavioral patterns, and formed repeated contact with a single human subject. His tone remained calm. But Lyra understood what lay beneath it. Concern. And something colder. Assessment. He is part of my study, she said. Incorrect, the handler replied immediately. He has become the focus of your study. Lyra did not respond. Because he was right. You were sent to observe humanity, he continued. Not attached to it. Attached. Another human word. But now, she understood it. Fully. The warning. You are approaching emotional integration, the handler said. Lyra's breath slowed. That was not the objective. No, she said quietly. It is a risk. Pause. Then. You will terminate the connection. The words landed with precision. Clear. Final. Absolute. Lyra felt it instantly. That internal shift. Not confusion. Not hesitation. Resistance. And that had never happened before. The first defiance. No. The word left her before she could analyze it. The connection went silent for a moment. Then. Repeat. Lyra opened her eyes. Stared at the city lights beyond the glass. And said it again. No. This time. She meant it. The truth revealed. You are compromised, the handler said. I am evolving, Lyra replied. Emotion is interference. Emotion is understanding. Silence again. Longer this time. More dangerous. You believe this human is essential? He asked. Lyra thought of Armin. The plane. The cafe. The moments of quiet connection. The way her fear had changed. The way her perception had shifted. Yes, she said. Then you have failed your mission. The sentence was meant to end the discussion. To close the path. To define her. But instead, it clarified something. Completely. Then the mission is incomplete, Lyra said. The consequence. You will return, the handler said. Immediately. Lyra's heart, something she had barely noticed before, felt heavier now. Stronger. No, she said. Again. No. This time there was no hesitation. No doubt. No analysis. Just decision. Disconnection. The presence vanished. Abruptly. Cold. Final. The link was cut. Not paused. Not suspended. Severed. Lyra stood alone. Truly alone. For the first time since arriving. There was no guidance. No oversight. No mission. Just her. And the weight of her choice. The realization. She had crossed the line. Not gradually. Not accidentally. But completely. There was no return now. Her world would not accept this. Her species did not tolerate deviation at this level. She knew what it meant. Exile. Permanent. irreversible. And yet, she didn't feel fear. Not the way she expected. Instead, she felt something else. Clarity. The final meeting. The next evening Lyra went to the cafe. Not as part of a routine. Not as part of a mission. But because she chose to. Armin was already there. When he saw her, he knew. Something had changed. "You okay?" he asked. Lyra sat down slowly. "No," she said. Honest. Direct. Human. He leaned forward. "What happened?" She looked at him. Really looked. No filters. No masks. No distance. And for the first time, she decided to tell the truth. The truth. "I am not from here," she said. Armin blinked. "Not from this city? Not from this planet?" Silence. A long one. Not disbelief. Not immediately. Just processing. Then, he exhaled slowly. "Okay," he said. "That's a lot." "Yes." "You're serious?" "Yes." He studied her face. Searching. For signs of humor. Of deception. Of confusion. He found none. "You're telling me you're an alien?" he asked. "Yes." The word landed quietly. But heavily. He leaned back. Ran a hand through his hair. "This is insane," he said. "Yes. But it also explains a lot." She tilted her head slightly. "Such as? The way you act. The way you notice things. The way you feel things differently." She nodded. "That is correct." He let out a small laugh. Not mocking. Not dismissive. Just overwhelmed. "Wow," he said. "Okay." Another pause. Then, "Why tell me?" The answer. Lyra didn't hesitate. "Because you are the reason I stayed." That changed everything. His expression shifted. From confusion. To something deeper. More serious. "Stayed?" he repeated. "I was ordered to leave," she said. "I refused." "Because of me?" "Yes." Silence again. But this time, it wasn't uncertain. It was full. Of meaning. The choice. Armin looked down at the table. Then back at her. "You barely know me," he said. "I know enough," she replied. "That's not how this works," he said. "People don't just change their entire life for someone they just met." Lyra thought for a moment. "Then perhaps," she said slowly, "that is where we are different." He stared at her. And something in his expression softened. Not fully understanding. But not rejecting either. The fear returns. "You know this could go very wrong," he said. "Yes." "For you, and for me." "Yes." "And you're still here?" "Yes." No hesitation. No doubt. Just truth. The final moment. Armin looked at her for a long time. Then, he did something simple. The same thing that had started everything. He reached across the table. And took her hand. This time. It wasn't instinct. It wasn't fear. It wasn't accident. It was choice. Lyra felt it instantly. Stronger than ever. Clearer than ever. Not just warmth, but connection. Real. Mutual. Human. "You're not alone," he said quietly. And this time, she believed it. Completely. The ending that isn't an ending. Lyra stood at the edge of a new reality. No mission. No return. No certainty. Just a world she was still learning. And a connection she didn't fully understand. But chose anyway. Earth was still heavy. Still unpredictable. Still intense. But now, it wasn't empty. Because of one moment. One touch. One human. Everything had changed. And for the first time, she didn't want to go back.